So official.
You ready, Jeff?
We're ready.
Okay, let's begin the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting for September 3rd, 2014. A couple of brief announcements. Please turn off your cell phones, and please take any extraneous conversations out into the hall. We are making both an audio and a visual recording of this meeting, and if you are going to record any part of this meeting, you are required to let us know. So with that, we'll start the public meeting with public comment. Anything from the public on matters that won't be heard tonight? Okay, seeing not. Go to the public hearing notices of intent. And the Lily Pond Realty Trust applications of 2729 31 North Liberty have all been continued to September 17th. So with that, we go to Gund at 3, 5, 7, 11, and 15 East Tristram Ave.
All right, guys. We're in here. Where are there are two plans.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, Blackmore Associates, along with Lee Wisher of Woodhull Group and Stan Humphreys of LEC Environmental. We're before you tonight for the second public hearing on this application. We have, in between the hearings, submitted additional information in response to the comments and questions from the first hearing. We have revised the plans, and so I'll start off going over the revised plans and then review the additional information that we submitted, and then begin the discussion to try to address some questions and concerns we have in the application. It's a two-sheet set, but I think you can really concentrate on sheet one, which is before you. This is the sheet where we made some significant changes to the design and to the plan. To start off, what we've done is to modify the proposal that had included a sand drift fence to eliminate the drift fence and just use the back row of posts to support the tubes. So there's no longer the zigzag fencing, but the row of posts, which then support the row of tubes. And we believe that this assemblage of materials does not now constitute a coastal engineering structure. This is done in an effort, while we believe that the sand drift fence may have been a preferable solution, we are trying to meet the concerns of the Commission that we heard with respect to coastal engineering structures being approved really for the project. The design is very similar to what was recently approved by the Commission in Wawinit, including a sand-filled tube and posts. And there was a very specific determination in that order, which we included with the supplemental information, that assemblage of materials did not constitute a coastal engineering structure. So we're trying to follow the same similar design to meet your concerns with respect to where you approve coastal engineering structures and where you don't. So as we see it, we believe that this assemblage of materials is beneficial to stabilize the bank and get the plantings, and does not, as I said, is not a coastal engineering structure. The design of the tubes remains the same, anchored with the rope that's tied through them, very similar to the other approvals that have been other designs that have been approved along this shoreline. The other major change that we made to the design plan that's before you is to significantly shorten the length of the stone revetment extensions. There was significant discussion with respect to the portion. What I'd like to point out, and I'll go to both sides of the table, is that now the only portion of the proposal that is stone are these two rectangles right here. So we've shortened them to the maximum extent that we feel that we can in order to still maintain the integrity of the existing stone structures, which are threatened in collapsing, and then to also protect the pre-78 structures. There was concern with respect to when we had the extensions running, the stone extensions running along the bank, that it was really too much, and it was getting into additional protection. So we've reduced them to be about 55, one's 55 and one's 60 feet long, to be as small as we feel that we minimal sized to, as we said, really maintain the integrity of the structures that are there. What I would also point out is on the westerly end, we had existing hard structures, which were these timber bulkheads. And so we've kept the proposed extension completely behind what was already hard armoring. So I think that in this case, should the commission be inclined to hopefully support this proposal, which we believe is really a good solution for this situation and does protect your interests and meet the performance standards, that we significantly shortened it from even what was formerly hard armored, and then all of that material, the timber, would be removed from the beach. So with that, we do feel that that this, by making these changes, that we do meet your performance standards there. With respect to the additional information that was submitted, we did a letter to try to address, there were some questions about alternatives analysis, so I've run through really what as a team we had reviewed and been thinking about of ways that we could work to stabilize this bank. Again, they're permit for existing dune guard that would all be removed, no more plastic fencing. This really changes from having the non-biodegradable materials to essentially natural-based materials, the coconut fiber for the tubes and the timber posts for really this whole section of beach. We're still proposing all the same conditions with respect to nourishment and monitoring. We've shown 3 monitoring transects that we would propose, where we would continually provide information to the commission at the same location, so that you can start to develop a good understanding and a record in terms of how the system is performing. The additional information that we submitted, again, we ran through some of the other projects in the area that have been permitted and installed that do include both fences and tubes. We realize that every site is different, but I think it's worth pointing out that those systems are functioning well. Some maintenance reporting is happening, but we're not having adverse impacts as a result of that we've noted as a result of those installations. We also changed and updated the narrative and the waiver request to reflect the revised plans, so that you have a complete sort of summary and application for exactly what's before you now. There was one point in the letter, in the waiver request, that I would point out that I didn't, as I updated it from the old waiver request, that I have mentioned under the interest of recreation that there was a sand drift fence. Just to be clear, that was a carryover, and there is no sand drift fence proposed. We're not trying to slip one by. It was just I want to just mention that it is in the letter, but that in that one spot, it's not the intention. We'd be happy to go through further in terms of the waiver. I think just briefly to hit on with respect to Section 205B1 and new revetments and bulkheads. Again, the only thing that we're proposing here is the small, minimal as extension as possible that does still serve to protect pre-78 structures, as well as the integrity, as we said, of those existing structures. We did also provide, as part of the supplemental information, I purchased the 1971 aerial photograph that then serves as evidence that it shows the structures in essentially the same configuration in the same location. All 3 of the structures that are shown on the plan. So I'm assuming that's in your packet, but we have very similar to what we have here. There is one additional piece of information that I have since come across that I would like to submit for your record, which I hadn't realized, that there is, that Google Earth actually has new imagery available for 2014. So we would like to leave you with that. I think it's just helpful to show, you know, the situation as it currently exists on the ground. And again, it's reflected by the survey. And the one thing that I would like to point out is the erosion that's occurring that on the westerly end of the project area. And within this area, that's exactly why it's getting closer to the pre-78 structure. It's threatening the integrity and stability of the existing structure. It's going to, if we don't do something there, we're going to have to have a continual maintenance effort. And what I would like to present to the Commission is that by this small 55-foot long additional piece of stone, in the long run, you're going to have much less of a maintenance effort, less activity that's going on down there, and that therefore goes to further meet your protected interests. The other thing that I would point out is that in 2012, I had come to this Commission with a letter, and we had done repair and maintenance in that area. And exactly what was hollowed out there, we put about or the owner did, about $25,000 worth of sand in to fill that as an effort. And I think that is part of your record and stands to demonstrate that simply adding sand is an ineffective solution in this case. And so that the proposal that's before you is really, as determined in the alternatives analysis, the most feasible, most reasonable way to proceed with the application and the project. And with that, I would defer to my colleagues if they have any additional information, and then to the Commission for questions or concerns that you might have. We'll just take the questions.
Yeah, just questions, I think, unless Dan, you got some.
So if we could, Mr. Chairman, we'd be happy to hear from you and the public, and then see what we could do to address any outstanding questions or concerns. We're hopeful that I've tried to go through everything that we heard last time, and hopefully we've done that.
Okay. Any questions for Art and his gang here?
Did we ever get a chance to calculate the distances to the top of the bank?
I did. I didn't include that in the letter. It's just under 100 feet.
For the one here on the...
Both of them are quite close. On the other one, I guess I should be more specific. On the westerly one, it's just under 100, and of course that's here, and you've got a little bit of additional erosion since then. And on the other one, it's about the same, but not to the main house, but to the smaller structure, but still structure's the structure.
And then the one in the middle is over 100.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So for that one in the middle, you're thinking maybe 10, 15 years before the bluff is at the current erosion rate. So can you refresh us as to what the erosion rate is approximately right in front of this house here? There's two empty lots, this house, and then the edges of the
Yeah. We calculated it just around a foot per year, a little bit right around there. I have to go back and look at my report specifically, but that's the average erosion rate along there. But again, the point being is that, you know, that's an average, so you get it episodically occur. Sometimes you have more, sometimes you have less. So.
But, you know, even if it was 2 feet per year, you'd have 50 years before that house would have that.
Yes, and that's a good point, but I think that the intent is that that objection was directed at being a coastal engineering structure. And so what we've tried to do is take this out of the coastal engineering structure realm to have make it a soft solution so that it would be more formidable to the Commission. I'm not arguing with your math, but I mean that's one of the reasons why we've gone this extra step to try and meet the performance standards and to, you know, make this a permittable project.
Could you expand on that just a little bit, the performance standard that refers to the coastal engineering structure?
Art, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Sure.
Okay.
First, I'll just answer the question that was asked, and the distance is about 125 feet. to the top of the bank, to the centerline structure. And I would concur and agree with exactly what Lee said, that in terms of that we're not looking at a coastal engineering structure as part of the proposal. In terms of the performance standards, the ability of the coastal bank to transfer sediment from the bank to the beach. And again, we believe that that performance standard is very well met in terms of sacrificial sand cover and using a porous coir tube that also releases sand when it's acted upon. I think we can get back to the discussion, if you'd like, that part of the reason for doing this is to release the sand at a closer rate to what a naturally consolidated bank would, as opposed to just placing nourishment unconsolidated, and how quickly then that transfers from one resource area to the other. So on that basis, we believe that this solution very much meets that performance standard with respect to still allowing the transfer of sediment and having it as closely possible mimic the rate that would naturally occur.
Of just straightforward factual type questions on this on this. Do you have any idea what that is? That area, it's just darker. I'm just trying to
Yeah, that's what we're replacing here, and it is labeled on the plan. That's where the coir envelopes are.
Right
that,
now?
Oh,
that,
now.
that's right, that were there, so,
So you've got core, right?
right, and that hasn't been effective. And so, again,
And why do you say it hasn't been effective?
because it's continued to require constant maintenance and erode
A road where?
in this
That's the
area.
core then.
Yeah, right, and, you
But I
know,
mean, that-
this
you'll still
itself,
get some-
I think that what you have is, this photo is probably after a, you know, a maintenance effort. In other words, it's been a continual, difficult spot.
So the core is not an option to
Oh, I think it
replace
is
the,
an option.
well, what you're suggesting.
We're suggesting that in these areas, on what we would call the flank, here and right here, that the most reasonable alternative is stone. And we've kept that as minimal as possible, but that otherwise, what I think is gonna happen is that if what the commission were to be suggesting is that this project should eliminate those and put the tubes from rock to rock, that in these end spots, because they're angled to the ocean, that you're gonna have greater wave forces that are constantly acting here, and you're gonna continue to have on the flanking spots that are further out, more damage to these fabric tubes that you're gonna have to then be, again, remobilizing more activity. So we're trying to come up with, again, when we get, but that's why we eliminated, because I heard the concern, we eliminated, what I wanted to do was to have the stone come this and then overlap with the tube, so that you sort of got both in the areas where the wave energy and forces are the greatest. But in order to try to meet the concerns with there being too much rock, too much hard armoring, we've eliminated that to what we feel is the minimum that would be required to resist the force that's there without having to be down there multiple times a year refixing the tubes in this area. I mean, again, I think that part of looking at the solutions is how often are you going to have to, how well will it perform? And that's part of,
The
you know,
stones, though, are a coastal engineering structure regardless of where you know, that portion of it.
That's right.
Is a CDS.
that's right. We don't just, you know, there's
disputing that.
yeah, no, there's
It's
no.
new stones.
There's no, you know, there's no dispute or question that, that basically the 60 feet and the 55 feet, again, which isn't all that long or great when you look at, in proportion to the entire structure that you have, we're talking about a very, very small piece as a percentage. And we're just doing what we think would be just enough to not have to, if we have fabric in these areas, when you look and see the kind of force that's happening right there, a fabric tube, I don't, as an engineer, in my opinion, it's not going to hold up, it's not going to perform to stabilize the bank, to protect the integrity of the structure that's there, and ultimately to have the pre-78 structures remain threatened. So,
But I don't, I mean, I think you've got several years before you've got so much flanking that it actually endangers this small structure
Mhm.
here. I mean, you're probably talking, I mean, it's not imminent danger, maybe 15, 20 years. And I don't know how much
Yep.
sand nourishment's been placed on top of these core bags. If
Mhm.
you've actually mimicked that. I mean, in my
Yep.
head, there's still a feasible and in fact, in presence, alternative to the revetments on each end of there. Something that can hold that line. I mean, I know it's.
Is that a question?
No, I'm saying that there's an alternative in place right now, and that, my question was, is there any sand being placed on that at a constant, are you
no,
nourishing
only
it?
when only for the repair. And again,
So it's not, there's not a component of
No,
nourishment.
there
which
isn't,
has
with
been
that
shown in
approval.
other locations
right,
to allow.
right. So those are older approvals that didn't incorporate the nourishment
Right.
requirement.
So if these revetments are extended, what's to stop the in-scour from just moving down to the end of the new revetment?
Well, you're further back from the ocean, and you're not at an angle to the ocean anymore. So those are the two things that you're going to have less force as you move further away from the water. And again, so that's what we're trying to do is to, you're still, of course, you know, we're always going to be subject to some wave action to some settling to some, there's going to be transfer of sediment. But what we'll do is also then come along with now the maintenance component that we've proposed. We're not looking to go and install and go through a project like this then to just let that keep happening. We're in a gap situation here where these properties are stuck, if you will, between what's happening here and here. And by maintaining these areas with sacrificial cover, now that's not to say this system is going to require maintenance. There are going to be storms that ultimately at some point will deflate the bags. But by being that greater distance back, we feel that now it's not going to be a situation that you have now where this structure becomes threatened back around like this as long as this is maintained. So,
Art, if I could pipe in for 2 seconds, I'm on the same team here. There's two important legal points that I want to just make sure are in the record, which is that one, these structures where we're proposing adding the extension of the revetment have already been determined by this commission to be valid places for these rock revetments, and we're just talking about extending and repairing that to protect structures that have already received that determination. And the second thing is that the rate of erosion that we're talking about here is artificially reduced by the fact that there is erosion protection in place, and what we're trying to do is improve that erosion protection. It's not the natural occurring rate there now. So the rate that we would really be talking about without the erosion protection would be much greater, which is what you see, up and down the bluff. This is we're going from something that is a coastal engineering structure to something that is not. Right? The dune guard, is that a coastal engineering structure?
No.
Okay. Well,
But
we're
you're saying
going
the
from
dune guard's helping right now.
So we're going from the dune guard is helping here and slowing it down.
Yeah.
So it's really faster, but it's been artificially slowed. But second of all, there's no coastal engineering structure here, and where there is a coastal engineering structure on either end is protecting both the structures that are in place that have already been determined to be protectable, as well as the structures of the revetments themselves. And I want to make sure it's important that everybody understands that we're talking about both of those things, that this is not a new coastal engineering structure to protect a structure that has not had that determination already made.
I would
Steve,
argue that it
hang
is.
on just a sec. Steve, are you representing the
It's
guys?
the same, yeah.
Okay. Would you just say your name? I mean, we all know who you are.
Stephen Cohen, for the record.
Okay, thanks.
I guess, Ernie, I'd like to address your comment here, is that, again, for the record, Lee Wisher from Woods Hole Group, what the extension allows us to do is to a curve in a coastal engineering structure generates the most force. I mean, the waves come in and are concentrated on it. So what we're trying to do is to manage this end and make this a more manageable maintenance project. We know that we're going to have to manage this end, and that at some point we're going to have to come in and repair the tubes like we have done on other projects along this section of the coast. So I don't hope the commission doesn't think that this is going to be the end all. Any soft solution needs repair. We're going to have to come in and do the nourishment, and at some point we're probably going to get a storm, and the tubes are going to need to be replaced or repaired. So, but what we want to do is manage this end to make it reduce the amount of maintenance that's required right here, so the whole project doesn't unravel from if we had to start right here. And so that's why we're proposing to do that.
Okay. Anything else from the commission? We'll go to the
Couple
public.
more, yeah. The size of the posts, and then I was going to bring something up from our regulations.
labeled 8-inch.
8-inch size posts.
Exactly, yeah.
So with the 2 core bags, nourishment on top of that, 8-inch posts, and anchoring established. That's your project, and then
I have
the extended revetments on each end. So it's
That's
still
correct.
if we were to grant this, we would still call this a coastal engineering structure with the revetment portion of it, because it's one project.
Oh, I don't think so. No, not at all. I think that that the only portion of this assemblage of materials that would be called a coastal engineering structure are the extensions, and that
But
you
it's
would
not
differentiate.
separate.
Oh, it's very separate. I think you would absolutely differentiate in your order that the only portion of the project that constitutes a coastal engineering structure are the minimal extensions of the it's a minimal extension of the existing stone revetment, and that this assemblage of materials is not a coastal engineering structure, which would be exactly consistent with what you determined in Wawinick.
Well, I'm just trying to think of insanity. I mean, I can't remember that we've ever thought about
Protecting blank
the
empty lots.
well, empty lots is one issue, and then the core bags there, I thought we've always considered those the structures and granted waivers, but I could be wrong.
Not in all cases. There have been some, and the one in Wawinick is a good example. That's the most recent one, where we had the core logs with the posts that were found.
Say 8-inch size posts.
Correct.
Those are 4-inch
Four-inch
posts.
posts versus 8-inch posts. So we have not exactly approved something like this exact same.
No,
thing.
but I guess my greater point is, you guys can find portions of it to be however you want. You can determine the structure as a whole, you can determine portions of the structure. I mean, you can make findings in however you guys wish. I mean, you can look at the different materials separately and say the extensions are, the core logs are not. I mean, we can certainly break those out in findings if that's the will of the commission. That's simple enough to do.
Sarah, do you have the regs there on coastal engineering, the
Yeah.
definition of what?
Well, no, I'm more concerned about the regs on 2.2B2 coastal beaches, 2.205B1 coastal banks. No new bulkheads or coastal engineering structures shall be permitted to protect structures constructed or substantially improved after 878. Bulkheads may be rebuilt only if the commission determines there's no environmentally better way to control, I know we have a bulkhead coming up later, an erosion problem, including in appropriate cases the moving of the threatened building. Other coastal engineering structures may be permitted only upon a clear showing that no other alternatives exist to protect a structure built prior to 978 and not substantially improved from imminent danger. So I would still say that both of the structures on the end are not in imminent danger. I don't believe the structure in the middle is in an imminent danger. I think there's really a nice beach actually in front of this entire 3 parcels because there's not a hard structure of any kind in front of here. So I think they've got a nice usable beach that is providing a resource that we protect. It's got a coastal bank that's eroding naturally. I don't see that there's a need for this level of protection. I think there are softer solutions, more maintenance, a variety of things I think are more appropriate for this.
And then the interests that we're protecting that are,
The coastal bank, the source of the coastal bank is the sediment source, the coastal beach as a function for not only habitat, but to absorb wave energy, storm, damage prevention from both the beach and the bank, and there is evidence even with the softer solution of core bags that those still act differently than unconsolidated
and the
coastal
vertical
level.
buffer to storm damage and sort of
Right.
being, and our need to evaluate each of those interests.
Exactly. I think the extension of the road is especially worrisome. And not, I mean, I think there's
No,
other things
I
that can be
agree.
done. I think there's other things that can pose, I think there are midpoints.
I mean-
I understand the extensions. I understand the further you get back, the least it's going to affect your soft cover here. You're just trying to get it back, something a little more substantial
But
to
it's,
stop
But
that.
still at an angle.
but the beach is going to shrink it. Like, I mean, there was a beach I'm sure there was a beach with great depth before
Mhm.
when this was originally built. So it's like, yes, at the moment it may be farther away from the ocean, but it's going to get, this beach is going to shrink up again, and then it's going to be an issue. I mean, I think your revetment definitely needs some repair. The transition to the hard to the soft, I'm not sure about. I have a concern about that. I just think you're going to have all that energy that's going to be coming off your return and then hitting your soft structure. I think you're just going to have the same issue.
Well, that was why we wanted to go a little bit further.
Yeah, but then it's going to. I mean, I think wherever that end is going to be, you're going to have an issue. I
Has
think
any of that return disappeared from the original stone revetment? Has any of it been
Yeah, I'm
damaged?
curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of this,
Was it?
this section here is back to its, back in the original return.
Well, there's a
it's gone.
bulkhead there, right?
Yeah, how far did it originally go, the stone or four? That's,
I mean, I think what you see, I mean, they haven't added stone, it's just starting to collapse on
That's what I'm
itself.
saying.
It's
Some of
collapsing
it's already
in.
gone, so.
Right.
And
Part
what's
of this
happening
is
to
to
the western
establish
end?
that.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far. I don't think that that it's only a reestablishment. It is an extension.
Yeah,
It's
no, I
not,
understand.
it's not maintenance. We have allowed
Yeah.
many times maintenance of a
Yes.
current structure, and that wouldn't be.
And I don't know the exact distance of where exactly it was compared to, where it's collapsed. But there's damage that's happening there. But again, if we don't, if I only brought the tubes out there, then it's just going to suffer even more
well,
damage.
I know.
So that's why we're
Right.
trying to come up with a solution that is meets your interests and
Right.
then also performs.
Right.
And then is able to be maintained.
Right, you obviously have the right to maintain the
Which
wetland.
at this point would be
Understand.
Well, that's
to,
just what I'm asking. There's no as-built. You don't know where that was, when it was
Sure.
built, where it was, how
No.
far would you lost? 10 feet? Have you lost no feet? Or
Well, you can figure at one point it must
yeah,
have gone
I
to
could
the
only
wood
go on
bulkhead.
arrows. I don't think it went all the way back there. No, I think that
Yeah.
there's been more erosion that's happened there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Andy, to your point, though, moving the soft structure away from the return is presenting a different. Having the soft structure start at a point where there's less impact is the goal here. There's always going to be
Right.
a pressure point at the intersection of the soft and the hard. And frankly, the client, I'm sure it's not going to surprise you, would prefer rocks the whole way and call it a
Exactly.
day. But when we push them, let's go with a non-coastal engineering structure with these core bags and these posts, we said, how far can we take it, and then where do we hit the point where it really has to be hard, and how do we make that as small as possible? And we went from lengths that were much better engineering to lengths that are much better for what we hope is an approvable permit for you that has the minimum amount of rock in the place where there's the highest pressure points. And then when you get to the soft transition, it's where there's a significantly different angle where it presents to the sea in a way where we're hoping that it will take it.
Right.
But you're just transferring your energy, wave energy, you're just passing the buck further down. You're just basically building that, you're walling yourself, you're painting yourself into a corner.
Well,
That's not really true because of the fact that once you get the highest portion of the wave energy is going to be right here. Okay, and so what we've done is that we've translated it here, which has reduced the wave energy, and in our opinion is making it a more manageable joining of the soft and the hard structure here. If it goes to here, I can virtually guarantee you the first storm is going to take the tubes out. We're going to be down, and we're going to be chasing those tubes just because of the fact the way the energy runs along the structure, and it's concentrated right there where you have a sharp angle. It's going to be a maintenance nightmare. And so that's why we proposed what we thought was the minimal to move that pressure point down to where it would be we could manage the maintenance to it at a reasonable level.
Well, just a couple of points here. As Sarah has pointed out, these are new bulkheads being constructed. This is, in our past efforts anyway, we've always considered maintenance to be, or replacement to be in kind, same footprint, maybe a little bit different footprint if there's like a steel sheeting going on the front of a wood bulkhead or something like that, but not expansion and length along the beach as a maintenance or repair effort. And then just to read what our definition of a coastal engineering structure is, it's any bulkhead, revetment, seawall, riprap, groin, jetty, seaweed, artificial seaweed, plastic sheeting, or other structure intended or constructed so as to prevent or alleviate storm damage or modify tidal action, wave action, littoral flow, or erosion. So that's a pretty broad definition, and it doesn't really, at least explicitly, it doesn't differentiate between hard or soft structures. I think the state regs may, but our local regulations don't seem to differentiate that, but that is, I think, in my personal opinion, is that's broad enough to consider sand-filled core bags to be a coastal engineering structure. And my personal desire would always be to call it a structure and then grant a waiver than to not. Kind of err on the side of caution, I think, if anything. If it's an error or not, I don't know, but
I'm just not sure that this qualifies for waivers, because you've got 2 empty lots, a house 125 feet back, and then flanking for the 2 pre-78 houses on the sides that are 100 feet. I mean, I think there's ways that they can slow that down that are less.
Yeah, we're not doing anybody any favors not allowing something, because it really is accelerated by those.
Why buy those hard?
well, that's, yes,
Yeah.
we're seeing what the
Well, by
problem
a
with the hard
combination of
structures are.
things, and we tend to overlook here. We talk about the beach and the beach narrowing, but the regulatory standard does not prioritize the sediment to the beach over the vertical buffer to storm damage. When you look at this, I think this photo is a pretty clear example. You have these 2 where they exist. A fair amount of land has been protected from storm damage, and where they don't exist, it hasn't. And where we have what we're characterizing as accelerated erosion caused by these things is into the land that's protected that wouldn't be there. So it seems to me that it fits to do something to slow that down.
Yeah.
And given that we have these 2 protected interests that are not sort of right aligned, we have the vertical buffer to storm damage, and we have the sediment to the beach, and it seems to me that not allowing something is just ignoring the vertical buffer to storm damage part. So I tend to agree with the chairman about, I don't care what you call it, but figure out a way to let something happen here.
Yes.
Well, it still
I
acts
think-
as a vertical buffer without protection. I mean, the bank itself is acting as a vertical buffer. So whenever you have a coastal engineering structure or something that's not, you have to mimic that. Then the best protection is that coastal bank. That's.
Well, and there's no difference between the beach between these 2 points than, say, everything west of them. I mean, it's not like, I don't necessarily think that the center has been accelerated by the ends. I think the
ends.
points
The
right
ends are
adjacent are
accelerated,
getting
yeah.
accelerated. But if you look at the general beach as a whole, and to the west, it's not anymore.
I think extensions will help that case.
I mean, I'm not necessarily against extensions to a degree.
You kind
I
of
mean,
taper them down and fold them back
I
in.
mean, I
so
think it's I understand you
But,
to save
yeah.
these corners.
Structure anyway.
If I may, just a point is that when you're talking about, if I could, to Mr. Chairman's comment, about not allowing new structures, especially as we talk about the westerly end, we had bulkheads here. We had hard structures. So it's all that timber that was there, and we're behind what was there. So I think there's a very valid point to be made that why this is not a new structure on this end. Well, let's talk about this piece right here where we can see the situation that you have there. We very specifically stayed behind this. So I think there would be an avenue for the commission to look at this westerly end and this extension in a way that didn't fall under the new bulkheads, because this was quite a wall that was down there with a groin that would all then be removed, and you could see what you have for a situation, and you could see how that is coming in on this house. So I think while we have a similar situation here, I think it is important not to just look at them both equally. I think that here there's very much a case to be made of why that's not a new structure.
So would you be willing to come back with just protection on one end of that time?
I think what I'm hearing today would have to kind of balance everything in and what we might or might not be, how we can best meet the interests and how we'll proceed. So I think the more feedback I could get from the commission and understand that maybe if, that, may help to that way, then, again, and we of course have, the owners as well to have to discuss this with, if we would enclose. I will tell you that hope was very much that we would come in tonight with a, a proposal that is greatly reduced from what we originally proposed and really wanted, which was scaled back from what they really wanted. We feel, pretty strongly that I don't know that you need to find that this assemblage of materials in the middle is a coastal engineering structure. It strikes me as why was the one in Wauwinet not, because it had 4-inch posts instead of 8-inch posts, but
I don't know why it wasn't either.
that was, that is in the harbor. So, my concern, the only reason the posts are a little bit bigger is so that the last thing any of us want to see are broken posts. And so, right, so you just have out on the sound here, we have a greater wave energy and potential, so that's the only reason I increased the size is, and again, the point there is to, again, to retain the toe for the stable slope, and so that we don't have, the tubes, bowing out, if you will, in this area, but that it still doesn't, an 8-inch post every 5 feet isn't blocking the transfer of sediment. We're not going post to post to post. You've got them 5 feet apart, so you essentially have gaps that are 4 foot 4 inches of wide open. So it's not a wall. We're not proposing a fence. We discussed it, that we would keep a vertical fence. But again, I felt very much that if that was the case, then the commission would say it is a coastal engineering structure. And we're trying to look at what would be, what could you find so that you didn't have to get stuck on your waiver situation for the empty lots and for that house. What's a reasonable soft stabilization alternative? And that's what we're really trying to find a middle ground, if you will, that meets the performance standards, that will perform to some extent on the stabilization, still allows all the transfer of sediment. So that's really what we were very much hoping that these changes, might do that, as well as more than half reduce the size of the stone. And again, that wasn't a giveaway design. That was what I thought as an engineer would be the best way to do it. Clearly, it was too much for the commission. We heard that in terms of additional new structure, and so I'll put that out.
Mr. Chairman, just a thought. We wanted a little off our sort of meeting protocol, doing from a questions that are already deliberating. I don't know if they're trying to figure out what they want to do. We want to hear from the public sometime soon. I know there's a few people chomping at the bit out there, and then kind of see where it takes us to.
Well, I just had a couple of quick comments, thinking about this a bit. I know, I think with the, I don't want to mix our projects up here because they're different, but with the geotubes, I know we talked about adding returns to those to help limit the end scour. And it seems like that's what they're attempting to do here, is kind of put returns on this thing that could help limit the end scour. But the core could possibly do that. And the other thing is, one reason that I have voted for this design in other areas on the North Coast is because it does have that ability to, as far as I can see, as close as anything we've seen, mimic the sand release of a natural bank. And it also, what I really like about it is it has that final fallback of, well, if it really hits the fan, then you still got the bank to release sand in the, if we ever get something that's...
This is better than
So-
having a geotube or a rock or a bed.
Oh, yeah.
Or a bulkhead, but that doesn't mean there aren't softer solutions. And in other ones we voted, usually I vote against those, but in other ones where the commission's voted for them, the house in question has been pre-78 and much closer to an eroding bank with nowhere to move or very limited space to move. Certainly the octagonal house didn't have a half an inch to move.
Didn't it? Exactly.
So I think each project has to be taken in and of itself, and looking at what's occurring there, what's the importance of the coastal bank and the beach, and what's in danger. And I don't see anything in imminent danger here. I can see where they want to try to mitigate the edges of this hard structure on either side. I mean, that sucks to have that, but...
Okay, let's go to the public. Ms. McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman. Emily McKinnon for the Nantucket Land Council. I think I missed the last hearing when you first opened this, so I'll just briefly remind you that I submitted a comment letter that was probably in your packet before the last hearing, and you've already had quite lengthy discussions on this, so I'll try to just be brief and not too repetitive. In the letter, I go over some of our concerns and regulatory concerns, and as far as the bulkhead extensions go, I think it's pretty clear that it technically is new structure and it isn't necessarily going to be grandfathered under the existing revetments. And also, as has been stated, the state regulations, which I think I quote in my letter, and the local regs do require that if you are going to use a structure, a coastal engineering structure, to protect a pre-1978 house, that there be no other alternatives. The last time, which was quite a while ago, that I happened to walk this beach, I do recall seeing the core envelopes that are out here, and I also would suggest that if there is a need for extending these returns here, that did seem to be functioning. It doesn't seem clear how much maintenance has taken place on those or how much nourishment, as was brought up, had been used there, so I'm not sure that it's an option that's been fully explored or attempted in the past, and certainly not at that location. So I think that could be a viable alternative for those returns. And then as for the lots in the center and what's being proposed now without the fencing, the regulations obviously do make a distinction between coastal engineering structures and something that's not a coastal engineering structure. I would certainly argue, as I'm sure you could guess, that what was permitted in front of the Thompson property would constitute a coastal engineering structure under the local regulations, and I don't remember the discussion around when that was determined not to be a coastal engineering structure, but I would just ask the Commission to revisit that, which obviously you will have to. I happened to be out in that area and in July, and I just had some photographs. I was looking on my computer today of what was actually constructed out there under that permit, and I know that there's nourishment being proposed here on top of it as well, but I just wanted you as a commission to see what this project did look like, at least as of July 7th. This assemblage of materials that was determined not to be a coastal engineering structure, because I think it could be helpful in your discussions moving forward.
That's the Thompson that you
Yes.
just referred to?
Mm-hmm. And July 7th. I haven't been out there since then. So as you reconsider the assemblage of materials and whether or not it constitutes a coastal engineering structure and does those things that are listed in the local regulations, I just thought that these photographs could be helpful for that discussion. And I think I will leave it at that. You guys have already talked about a lot of my other concerns about whether these houses are in imminent danger currently or not. I'm certainly not arguing that nothing should be done, but I think that exploring some of these alternatives that have been raised is really important and necessary for the regulations, such as using some of these softer solutions with nourishment that understandably take more maintenance, but in the long term, as far as something that is permanent or not as permanent, just balancing out the potential impacts of the different options versus the maintenance that they may require. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the public? Oh, I don't see anything. Okay. Anything else from the commission?
That looks like it was something there, something of a structure.
I have one thing I wanted to add in, because it's an important point, and it's a part that's been left off our definition of coastal engineering structure a couple times, is we do list examples, but the important part is the last few words that say, or as determined by the commission. So when you guys are reviewing projects and you're reviewing the proposal and what's being proposed in its form and its function and what it's going to be doing, that's a determination that the commission is required to make. And in a lot of these cases, it's a determination that's important because you're setting up whether or not you're going to require waivers to, the pre or post 78 issue for coastal engineering structures. So making that determination is really fairly key. I mean, and we've done that before, and I know we've done that exercise with, I hate to beat on projects we've had on tonight, but other projects on Eel Point, other projects in the harbor, that things are and things aren't. That's a really critical part of the analysis that you guys have to do. And obviously, whatever proposal's there, and it also, I think, to keep in mind that you're also thinking of it not necessarily, and obviously it's the project as a whole, but sometimes the project has different components that behave in different ways. I mean, I hate to use an example that's a weird one, but if you had a spot where you had, a vertical steel bulkhead, a piece of sand drift fencing, and then a vertical steel bulkhead on the same property, there's a good chance that the commission would find that the steel bulkheads are coastal engineering structures and that the sand drift fencing is not a coastal engineering structure. So you can, as part of your analysis, determine what is and what isn't depending on what's there. And depending on how that works, the performance standards will apply to the portions that those qualify under, if that makes any sense to anyone. But that's a really critical piece that has to be done. I don't think there's any question that stone bulkheads and revetments and those things we've always determined to be. The rest of structures for solid filled tubes, sand filled tubes, I know comparing project is different because it's the way it's viewed differently. I know the state CZM and DEP view, solid core logs and sand filled tubes a little bit differently sometimes than the commission does, and that's how they view it regulatory wise. I mean, we can certainly take that under advisement, but it's up to the 7 of you to really look at the components and make that determination. That literally will be finding number one when we look at the project, is what we're dealing with so we know what performance standards apply.
Well, Art, what do you want to do here?
And we're happy for any other feedback that anyone else wants to give us. Otherwise, I think from what I've heard today, we'll have to have a discussion with our clients and see if I think there might be a little bit more information I can provide. I'm not too sure that
Should we
there's
take a
a
step
whole
to the
lot.
commission on one aspect of this? Just following what our administrator has said. Just from a practical standpoint, it seems to me that a lot of times what everybody wants to find is sort of the softest solution possible. And this is part of what was kind of nagging at me earlier on when I was asking about the definition and the term of coastal engineering structure and its application of rights, is that to the extent that it makes sense for the public and property owners to kind of see as a consistent direction of the commission and looking for the softest solutions possible, that we can be, I guess, clear and consistent on that. And as I look at this application, redoing the rocks is redoing the coastal engineering structure that apparently existed there as a bulkhead. If we building that, and I don't know what the other end, and the center of this thing has been softened up quite a bit, and it would seem to me that if we're going to be seeing applications, that you don't want to be kind of encouraging a lot of horse trading or people that come in to start with something that, and then work their way back to the soft, would start to give an indication of what our approvable things under different kinds of circumstances. It's looking to me like minimizing the amount of stone, fixing up this end, and doing and simplifying the rest of this is going a long way toward the sorts of things that we're asking people to do. And that's that. I'm wondering what everybody else is thinking. If that's feasible, then let's kind of get on with it. If it isn't, let's go back and roll the dice.
I like this.
People.
You came back with something less than what you had submitted before. I understand the engineering on both ends. I understand it's going to protect structures that are already there, that were approved for 378 homes. I like the core tubes down the center of that section. I think it's a good project.
Maybe guess
Yeah.
I'm not in favor of it. Are you in favor of
I think it could be softer on the end.
it? Dams, other person?
Dan, what do you think?
I don't know. I'm in the middle.
Yeah, I mean,
You
we're
know,
not-
a lot of
we're
it
not
depends on
imposed
what
to
kind of
anything,
whack
so-
storm you get whacked with. You go from
I just don't want to see
20
them back
years
in years ahead with the same problem. I think these will prevent that. I think it's a good transition into the center.
The problem is we don't typically allow
I
for
understand.
revetments to protect.
True, but they did have a hardened corner before.
On one end, there's two different ends
Yeah.
here.
On
I
the-
think you
right.
could, I mean, I.
The western end that has
There's
the
the
most
bulkhead
damage.
there, I
Okay,
might
wait,
even
let's-
entertain.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Andy,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I didn't mean to do too. Yeah, I mean, I could see repairing the revetment on the heavily damaged end, given the fact that you obviously did have a wall and a groin. I'm seeing two different photographs here, but and I'm not. Yeah, but I mean, you look at the west side of that same revetment, and it's got some scour going on in here, and we're not dealing with that
It's not taking the northeast hit or something.
True, but it's cutting around nice and sharp, and then same as the other side of the other revetment.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing the same thing, and you got a pond relatively close. You know, it makes you wonder, since we're not, you have these big revetments, and we're not necessarily nourishing, you're going to have a consistent problem with this thing. I mean, it's going to be constantly gouging.
But we are nourishing.
Well, you want to nourish the
The
beach,
core
but
tubes.
are you going to nourish?
Yeah.
You want to nourish the face of these?
Oh, no, that,
No.
that would be,
Somebody else's.
no, no, it would just, no. But
Well, I'm
we would-
wondering
but
what-
we would nourish the inner corners
Yeah.
of what's being proposed. So that's part of your overall maintenance effort, that now this gap area, this all becomes a maintained area.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing that this feedback was very helpful.
Yeah.
The way you'd have to nourish them.
I would obviously want something that works. I mean, obviously, I'm in
Yeah.
favor of doing something because I think it's it's damaging stuff right now as it is. So I'm just not sure how you
Okay.
do it exactly.
Do you know how long, like, I can see the picture of the revetment, and how long it wasn't maintained for?
Which one?
The one on the west
West side?
side, I guess.
Well, the one on the west side, we just filled that with sand in 2012.
As
With
far as
sand, but
rock,
as far
any
as
kind
like
of
the revetment
actual
and the
work
rock
on the
and,
rocks.
you know, the.
Oh, I don't know.
existing-
In other words, what?
Oh,
what
the
was
timber
last time that
pieces?
bulkhead?
Yeah,
No,
the
I
bulkhead
don't
was
know, I don't
repaired.
know. It's been a while, it's in tough shape, it's that timber is,
Yeah.
yeah, it's fair, you know,
It's
but
been
I don't
evaporated.
know how old. I tried to find the information, you had asked me that before. There's a gap in the available aerial photos from 71 to 94.
Well,
And I have no information in between that area, that era. So in 94, it's in the photos, and in 71,
So
it
it wasn't
isn't.
there in the 70s.
These structures weren't, no, but
Right.
I mean, the houses were. The
Yeah,
houses,
but
and that's the picture I submitted.
And there was a lot more beach probably. So.
Well, you have the 71,
Are we doing the same?
yeah.
Yeah, it's in your packet.
It's a change of owner, said the former owner's passed away.
As far as legally, I mean, we would have, you could argue some protection ourselves if you were replacing a previously approved hard structure that really was there.
Uh-huh.
I would argue there never was one here.
I understand.
You know, and I'm sorry, I just can't, I'm not going to allow for Revetment where there wasn't one.
Can't
Down
do it.
here it's a different situation. I would not, I understand exactly what Andy's saying on this end.
The
On,
west
on,
I
uh,
agree there was something there before.
on the four
I
west,
understand
on the
what
west
we're trying
end.
to do
Yeah.
also.
And I understand from an engineering viewpoint that there's our legalities and what we allow waivers for and there's stuff we don't. I mean, engineering often is not our friend when it comes to the regulations.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to belabor this, and I know you have other hearings to move on to. If we could continue for 2 weeks, I will. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, no.
No, I think, I agree, I think it's time we're going in circles here. so.
Yeah, if we could continue until the 17th, we'll discuss this as a team and could contemplate, consider everything we heard today, and come back to the commission with maybe the same thing and close, or maybe some more information and plans, but we'll work on it as a team, and thanks.
Okay, unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this to the 17th. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
So this is going to go in our practice.
Yep.
Right, that's
I need that one, and I need the other set of photos.
Yep, I'll give it to you.
The ones that Emily submitted.
Okay.
I saw.
Yep, I'll
That
make sure
takes
she
us
gets
to
those.
Cumberland Farms,
Or, I think Jeff wants those.
50 Orange Street.
Yeah.
You want to take one with you?
No, it's Jeff. Yes.
Jeff, we don't have a file number on this?
No, but Paul wanted to present, there's been a little bit of a plan change to get some feedback, and then
Hey, can we come to order down on that end of the table, please?
Preserve the record, Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors on behalf of Cumberland Farms, Inc., the leasee and applicant for this proposed notice of intent. Sarah Alger is also in attendance, who is counsel for Cumberland Farms. We wanted to bring you up to date on where we stand with regard to the application, with both conversations we had with the local DPW and with Mass DEP. As you know, we've submitted a notice of intent, which is strictly for work within land subject to coastal storm flowage. There are no wetlands on the site. There are no resource areas within 100 feet of the site. The application is a full notice based on land subject to coastal storm flowage. The plan is for the redevelopment and expansion of the existing Cumberland Farms store, which is a tear down and a rebuild, and the consolidation of parking within the project itself within a completely paved and curbed parking lot, with the intent of removing all parking from William Street abutting the site. The initial proposal with regard to drainage was a combination of infiltration and a detention basin along the westerly property line. That is the plan to the left here. That plan abutted the camp property to the west and abutted the 111 Orange Street LLC, which is a property to the north, of which the abutter was present at the original public hearing. The camp property to the west, I had met previously with Mark Camp and his engineer, Peter Ogren from Hayes Engineering, with regard to the initial drainage scheme, and revisions had been made based on both the camp's concerns and also concerns that were echoed to the property to the north at the original hearing. So the proposal that you have before you, that I have submitted to Jeff and will be submitting to the state, is a revision to the drainage system, which is essentially the elimination of the infiltration and detention, above ground detention component, to a completely enclosed drainage system, 24-inch HDPE pipe, which has a control structure at Orange Street with a complete storm scepter, water quality unit within the parking lot. It's essentially a detention system that works to detain the stormwater increase within an enclosed pipe system with no infiltration. We do propose a limited infiltration of simply the clean water from the roof based on a perforated system which will eventually tie to that pipe system, but we're only proposing to infiltrate the clean roof water. The rest of the drain water will be through a storm scepter into the enclosed 24-inch pipe with a weir outlet manhole at Orange Street, and then an ultimate discharge into the 21-inch drain line that exists on the north side of Orange Street, which ultimately ends up in Consu Springs. Now, the DPW is currently reviewing, and I don't know if this has been issued yet, but there's a draft ENF out for a complete redo of the drainage system within the Orange Street and Union Street area, and a restoration, tidal pond restoration of the pond in the Consu Springs area. I have a copy of that report. I have a copy of the plan. Our drainage system is essentially not dependent upon it, but eventually tying into it, it will continue to work. Since the time we last met, I've actually met on site a few times with the DPW on some early mornings, and they've, at this point, completely cleaned out the catch basin and drainage system at the intersection of Williams and Orange. A lot of that catch basins were just filled with silt and the pipes weren't working. Those have all been cleaned, vacuumed, and the system has been cleaned out within the last few weeks. The catch basin at the corner of Williams and Orange did provide some puddling under low-volume storms. That's been completely cleaned out, jet backed all the way to the next system, and then ultimately to the outflow, which is, in this case, to the south. There is also a drainage to the north down Union Street. That's the drainage system that we're proposing to tie into. The project itself, as far as the state is concerned, is a redevelopment project. It's a redevelopment and new with regard to the expansion of the parking lot. We do have to meet the stormwater management standards because we are in a MAP DEP Zone 2. So that is what the state is currently reviewing with regard to the certification with regard to the stormwater management standards, and that's, we're awaiting the DEP number once they're completed with that. So this is the format that we have here. It takes into the concerns to the abutter to the north, the abutter to the west, and essentially what it does is mitigates our increase in drainage, does not hinder the overland flow for the watershed that goes into the Camp and Orange Street LLC property, and in fact it leaves an area for passage of overland flow from that continuing area into our system and then ultimately off to Orange Street, which it presently does do. Then there's a green space that would be left in its natural state between the Camp property and the parking lot, and then also this area here, which is essentially, most of these lots have kind of been filled over the years in the back, and the low area becomes essentially the low section of the existing Cumberland parking lot. So we've addressed that. We are providing Mr. Camp's engineer copies of the plans and reports, and I think he will opine on that at the next meeting. We're comfortable we've met the standards with the state. We're comfortable we've met the concerns of the DPW, which did allow us to try into the 21-inch drain pipe, but didn't want to see the detention component within the site. And moving forward, we know what ultimately the plan is for Consu Springs, and our design is in conjunction with that. This plan does have, the town plan does have storm scepter units placed in Orange Street at their locations. However, we're not relying on that. We're putting our own unit in within the site itself. We are before the planning board on Monday with regard to planning issues, so I'll keep my conversation limited to why we're here, which is the drainage system and the land subject to coastal storm flowage. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may.
Anything from the commission?
Can you remind me of the depth to the groundwater?
Approximately, we're saying there's a modeling at about 24 inches on that low side. Yeah. Yep. I mean, I had groundwater weeping in the test pits. We did about 30 inches, but we had modeling at about 24, and that's what we've designed to that upper drainage system. So that's why it's been a tough little balance to try to meet the stormwater standards with regard to infiltration, but also the detention. That's why we're going with the solid system, the solid basically pipe with a controlled weir outlet. That system will be independent of. There's no need for infiltration with that system.
Well, it seems like an improvement from what I understand of these things. So anything from the public on Cumberland Farms? Yes, sir.
It sounds like this.
Would you
I'm
introduce
Mark
yourself?
Donato on 106 Orange Street, directly across the street, and I flood 3 times a year with that flooding in front of Cumberland Farm all the time. So you're saying the DPW has cleaned out that system, but the DPW has cleaned out that system in the past, and I've still got flooding every time. So I am concerned about tying into what you're saying is now clean and an existing line that does not have a problem. I think it does have a problem. But I'm not an engineer, and this is new to me, this plan. I have not seen.
Where is your lot mark?
William Street would
Williams is
directly
here,
into
Orange is here.
Yeah, William Street funnels directly into my property.
Okay.
Right, exactly across the street.
So what we did find under the low volume stores is obviously this catch basin was not working at all. This catch basin, the one at Cherry Street, was completely filled with sediment and silt. They weren't clean. We're actually not tying into that system. There is a 21-inch drain pipe which goes towards Union and then down Union. That's the system that we're tying into. But we have, at least right now, tried to clean this area up within this area here. The Consu Springs, the DPW proposal, which I'll kind of show you here, which that didn't necessarily address the issue at. Yeah, this.
Now that I see where you're tying in down at Union.
Yeah, we're going this way and then going down Union. Now, this plan that the town is proposing, which is ambitious with regard to Costal Springs. So they're proposing a new drain line lower here and then tying in here, and they're also proposing a new drain line here and going this way. So this, the intent of this is to handle all the water issues here and here. I didn't know why they weren't proposing anything in between, and I've asked them, we're looking into that too, but I don't know why they haven't proposed anything here. So what we've done is cleaned this catch basin, the catch basin's over here, and all this outlet, which kind of comes in and ties in this way. But this is what the town's proposal is, which is taking this, completely lowering all the drainage and getting it down, and then reworking this whole area at Costal Springs. And as I said, that's a draft ENF, I still believe now, which probably, I'm assuming,
Yes, it still a draft.
still a draft. So, but that's a pretty ambitious plan right there.
Okay, well, I just was cautioning the fact that that has been cleaned out and still continues to clean.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and what I'll do is obviously these next storms, I'm keeping an eye on it too, because if there's something that we, as part of this proposal, in regards to the DPW, our intent was always to go that way, but we are keeping an eye on what's happening at that corner.
But yeah, we're looking to make sure they can handle the water on site at least as well, if not better than it was before, that they're not allowing more ponding and that they're not offshooting their water.
Because the watershed, because you're taking water from Williams, you're taking water from Cherry, it's all coming down to that concentrate. And mostly it's flooding on this side of the street. It seems to be free clearing over here, but as I said, that's why we're trying to go the other way with it.
But the water will still flow away from Williams and down into that low area, is that correct? That's where your catch basin is?
Yeah, we're taking everything here, containing it, and pushing it that way. As opposed, the water that's still coming down Williams will still go down Williams.
Right, but you're not raising the elevation of the parking lot to dump more water onto it.
No, everything we're doing is going away from. There's a small section here, I think, that, we're looking at the wrong one. The small section here that's going to stay in this area, but no, for the most part, we're taking everything here, pushing it to the middle, and pushing it off to down here.
Should help a little bit.
Should help a little bit. Thank you.
Anything else from the public on Cumberland Farms? Okay, anything else from the commission? Okay, well, since we don't have a file number on this,
Well, he's going to get some planning, but this might be
Yeah.
totally different.
The drainage system's not going to change. No. The planning board issues are more concentrated on.
And you've got room to put in the system with the shallowness groundwater. You don't have a problem.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, and that's why we're limiting the infiltration to just the roof runoff. But yeah, no, it's a completely enclosed system. It's not relying on a infiltration. It's an enclosed system. Basically, hold it on site and then move it on. So.
well, would you like to continue for 2 weeks?
Yes, we will have.
You ready for that?
We will have a number in 2 weeks.
Okay, unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this until the 17th. Okay. Thank you.
You say that file number so
What's that?
You say the file number part so optimistically.
Okay, that takes us to Sanford, 16, 22, and 26 Easton Street.
Good afternoon, David Haynes for the applicant. Jeff, you also have Steve's police plan?
Yes.
This, we came before you 4 weeks ago, actually, and discussed this. This is a bulkhead replacement. There's an existing wooden bulkhead across the front of these 3 properties. There's 3 properties here, and they're all basically joined. They're all working together on replacing this wooden bulkhead that is deteriorating. What's being proposed is driving new sheet pilings directly in front of the existing bulkhead, and then and then backfilling and backfilling with a concrete slurry, and then tying in with and putting new whales on, tying into the bars up on top of it. Excuse me, right in through here, these bars, and tying it back in. Last time we were here, the question came up from marine fisheries about eelgrass beds, and you, rightly so, had concerns about that. Since then, I have performed an eelgrass survey out there from a dinghy with a glass bottom bucket. And I went out 100 feet, and I also took soundings at the same time. I found, I did it at low tide, it was a week ago Friday, low tide at 4:30 in the afternoon. I went out to, basically out 100 feet, which is the end of the pier, and did this whole area and found no evidence of any rooted eelgrass in this area. Beyond 5 foot of depth, it became obscured. I couldn't see the bottom, and it dropped off pretty quickly right beyond that area. So I can't say what's happening out here. There's pretty good flow out there because it comes around Brant Point. There's good flow in there. But there was nothing in here except for seashells, fragments of eelgrass in there. And it was a silty, sandy, fine sandy substrate on the bottom. Looking at the depths in here, what's being proposed is we want to come in with a barge, and we want to pull in a barge and have the sheet piling and the crane and driving the piles from that using a vibrator. And the barge is going to draw about 2.5 feet, and can stay up to 20 feet off of the bulkhead. It can stay back out 20 feet off. And I took soundings and also looking at the plan prepared by Earl and Sullivan. You look at the depths in here at mean low tide. There's 2.5 is in here right at 20 feet, right about 20 feet out. We've got depths. The one reason I brought out the plan by Earl and Sullivan versus the engineered plan is it was right when we were switching over the datums, and on the engineered plans the elevations aren't on the old datum, and on this one they're on the surveyed plan they're on the new datum. So that's why I brought this out. It shows more clearly that we have more water out here, out at 20 feet. And so we don't anticipate the barge. It may occasionally, at the landward end, occasionally hit the bottom, but it's basically going to be floating. The barge will be anchored by, they drop piles down. There's holes in the barge where they drop the piling down, a couple of pilings down, and I'm sure you've seen it. Just to anchor the barge in one position. We're not putting anchors out. We're not having to tug out there, holding it in position with wash coming out and disturbing the bottom. So there's very minimal disturbance to the bottom, and the barge will move across. We did look into coming in from the land side. It's very restricted in getting equipment in here. There's one area that we could possibly come through, but it means the beauty of the barge is we bring all the sheet piling in. It's the grain is right there. There's no disturbance, and we just drive it right from the water side, rather than coming in and trying to get into these houses and bringing the sheet piling through town and over on the ferry and everything else. And we thought it was a better solution. Last time. You did mention, Sarah did mention a siltation boom, and we're completely amenable to putting up a siltation boom to prevent impacts.
I think we've had to do that for like Great Harbor or any kind of this.
Yeah.
If you're looking at a barge, as soon as you put power to that, it's going to nose in and it's still going to stir up.
And also,
through no fault of yours. It's
the vibration, of the sheet pilings. Also, just to be noted, there is a beach. There's sort of a pebble beach over here, and it gets to a coarse sandy beach. This is only a couple of feet wide, down to about there, and then we lose it completely. There's no beach in front of this bulkhead right here. But there's just a very narrow beach along here, and then it starts to get wider as we go this way. The depths drop off very quickly going out here. This is Coast Guard right over to the Coast Guard's abutting us right here.
Yeah.
And the docks are right here, and they're pulling in and out of here. And it's very deep in there. It drops off to like 13 feet right in there, 10 feet right out here. It drops off very steeply beyond the 5.
Where would you put the siltation though?
I would put it. I would think you'd want it right in the shallows, right along here. I don't think you'd want to put it all the way out there. What are your thoughts?
Probably is, when you're actually doing the work, is the best time to figure out where you're gonna have it, but you might, I mean, the barge itself, how big is the barge?
The barge is 30 feet wide and 100 feet, about 100 feet long. I mean, what we could do is do it right
On either side of the barge?
on either side of the barge.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know if you would actually be causing, stirring up toward the back end of the barge, or whether you could keep the barge inside the silk curtain, but it sounds like you can. It sounds like you're going to have one
Well,
end.
just to throw in and to make it a little bit more clear for everyone, when you get right off the end of that pier and the Coast Guard pier and then the hatchery pier, you've moved into the navigational channel for the boat ramp at Children's Beach. So right at the end of those piers is significantly deep. I mean, it's 10 or 15 deep, so it drops off very quickly.
Yeah, I got 13 here and I got 10 right there, and it was 5 right here. It just
What was
Yeah, you
the
get into that channel.
Tara has some concern, has she seen this?
Yeah, we definitely reviewed it in our office, and actually Leah is the one out and took a look at it, but we haven't found any eelgrass or significant shellfish areas or anything really within the area that they would be
She's not
working.
concerned about marine water quality that close to it, just from the turbidity change?
No, I think for right now, especially the time of year that they're talking about doing it, it shouldn't be a significant issue. So
The reason I'm asking is an oceanographer, you've got really anoxic sediments, and then you stir them up, then it causes an anoxic event for the whole water column. So it's short term, but sometimes it can really put a damper on your life if your vibe outlet can't go in. So that's what I was asking about.
laboratory cameras
Huh?
a problem for that. The jetting pines or jetting something like that, it becomes a big issue.
Right.
There's no disturbance.
Because there's so much junk there.
Yeah.
So that's the sedimentation bins are supposed to help that a little bit. Tara's done pretty good.
yeah, the fall, winter, and early spring, from kind of our discussions with it, is pretty decent at stirring our, especially looking at scallops in the life cycle of those guys, where it's not as big an issue. It's when their life cycle is ending, and then they're right. So, and then just speaking on behalf of the hatchery, we're not in that time frame. We're still not taking in water directly from there, so it shouldn't be a big issue. Truth be told, our bigger issue is when the Coast Guard's moving around with the large vessels coming in and out. So,
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
Anything else from the commission? Anything from the public on Sanford? Okay, well, everybody's happy with this. You ready to close?
I'm happy to close.
Jeff, we have everything we need to close.
yes, sir.
Do I have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
I think you get that room on both sides.
Yeah.
You
We can always
should- Yeah, I think it's going to be on-site.
Okay, Zarella, 129 Wetland Road.
absolutely just leave them at that. Okay.
All right, thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors representing the applicant Ronald and Linda Zarella. This was a notice of intent for work at the end of Wawinut Road, in which we opened the public hearing. We were unable to close due to the fact that we had not received a letter from Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. We have received that letter. We have a no adverse effect under the Wetland Protection Act and a no prohibited take under the Mass Endangered Species Act. So that letter has been, I'm sure, assume already submitted to the commission, but there's an extra copy. This was for the redevelopment, if you will, and elevating of an existing structure within a barrier beach, adjacent to a coastal dune, within land subject to coastal storm flowage, and elevating the structure above the, to be in compliant with the current flood elevation standards, and then also removal of some of the existing decking and essentially some small additions to the existing structure. I think we discussed it, I think, in detail last time. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I don't know if there is even a draft order maybe prepared for this one or not.
Any questions for Paul?
We went over it pretty last time.
Anything from the public on Zerella?
Improvement on the septic system.
Oh, and an upgrade of the septic system, correct.
Okay, so,
Have you determined what you're gonna do with the septic system?
We're testing out there. I've got the, I was hesitant to go out there digging around too much, so I got the visa letter, so I know there are exemptions for it, but we waited. So we're testing Friday. So like I said, either option would be the tight tank or an on-site system. What we'll do then is, as soon as that gets straightened out, we'll also file a supplemental plan with the commission.
Right, so typically what we do in a case like this, David, and you'll see it when we go over the draft order, is when you're presented an option like this, is we review it for both options and both standards, and if they're both permissible or require a waiver, we can have a condition that requires the final option to be provided via plan and in writing to the commission, but they've all already been approved, but it
Either way.
formalizes, and that way when they come back for a certificate of compliance, we know that this case is a tight tank. So if there's a conventional system and they notice it was a tight tank, then we have an issue. So we can kind of follow up in cases where it's kind of pending, because it obviously, in this case, is going to require Board of Health approval as well, and tight tanks require specific approval from the DEP. So we can condition our way to that as long as both options are acceptable and compliant options.
Actually, tight tanks are now strictly under local control. So the DEP has gotten out of it's now a local, so we don't have to file now with the DEP as far as the tight tanks go. It's strictly under local, which they just recently changed. Yeah. So,
That's a good question.
yeah, so it sounds like we're ready to close then. You ready to close, Paul?
yes.
So, hey, Jeff, we have everything we need to close. Yes, sir. Okay, we'll have a motion to close.
Move to close?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Gator at 49 West Chester Street.
Really quick before Brian starts, this is where we conducted our site visit on Monday. Tuesday. Sorry, bad habit for me too.
One colored one. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental, representing the applicant, Donald Gator. The proposed project involves construction of a new carriage house. There's an existing dwelling and shed on the property. I don't know if everyone can see, but I've highlighted the existing structural footprint in orange here. There's bordering vegetative wetlands in the northern portion of the property that are partially defined by 1 foot to 2 foot tall retaining wall, just timber piles stockpiled. The proposed project involves demoing the shed and the structure and relocating the proposed new structure further away from the resource area. Under existing conditions, there are about 420 square feet of existing structure within the 50-foot buffer zone. Proposed conditions, there'll be a slight decrease to 390 square feet, but under existing conditions, the existing shed's 8 feet away versus 30 feet away under the proposed conditions. The carriage house itself will be on slab. As you can see, majority of the subject parcel is within the 100-foot buffer zone. There will be a new pervious driveway proposed off of West Chester Street, and the proposed carriage house will be on slab. There will be a stone patio, flagstone terrace, dry lane north of the structure and wrapping around to the west for access. And the 25-foot buffer zone is proposed to be restored. As some of you saw yesterday, there has been some minimal cleanup activities taking place thus far, but a lot of what was pre-existing, there was a lot of debris that had been overgrown, and some of the soil remaining there probably has a lot of undesirable material in it as well, so that will be scraped out and maybe partially screened, but probably mostly removed off-site, and the new loam will be introduced. And that area highlighted in blue will be
replanted with arrowwood, highbush blueberry, and bayberry shrubs with a native seed mix proposed to stabilize ground cover, and we're proposing to monitor that. And I think it's in its entirety, it's just over 1,000 square feet for the buffer zone restoration area, and then partially just under 200 feet within the wetland itself that there's probably some pre-existing fill material in that northeastern corner of the site. So that basically summarizes the proposed conditions. I think we are requesting a waiver, but over existing conditions, proposed conditions will result in a long-term net benefit to the resource areas and buffer zones.
Any questions? Is there a plan for dealing with the invasive species there? What do you?
Well, you know, the native restoration area, the proposed native shrubs, invasive species, the existing soil material will be removed, so removing a little bit of the seed stock, but that'll need to be monitored and part of the monitoring plan to make sure that the proposed shrubs to be installed aren't overrun. There's a fair amount of bittersweet back there. That'll just need to be a constant battle. So.
It's like the mother lode of bittersweet back there.
How close did they cut when we were there the other day? How close was that to the back lot line?
Well, you only saw the
saw
slim
the
margin
timber.
of the retaining wall exposed.
Yeah, so another
Retaining walls coming out.
another 10 feet
Correct,
or so.
yeah, the retaining wall is being removed.
Yeah, so another 10 feet more. They have to go back. Are they going to go back?
Yeah,
So-
just in that northeastern
Yeah.
corner there. And it'll be minimally shaped, the new loam introduced, so there's not going to be any steep runoff or anything like that.
Cool.
Yeah, it's definitely taken some fill over the years.
To screen out all those pennies and stuff. There's lots of money down there.
That's not the
Well,
money.
there's literally like
Full of cash.
that's like 500 pennies just laying around on the ground. Weird.
Leave a bucket out on the road.
Want the money.
Anything from the public on Gator? Okay. Brian, you ready to close this thing?
Yep.
Jeff, we have everything we need to close.
Yes.
I have that motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want that
Yep.
marked up first?
No, you,
That's all right.
Okay, that takes us to Hurley at 5 Sandy Drive.
Ryan Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants representing Holbrook Avenue Real Estate Trust, care of Hayden Hurley, trustee. Proposed project involves construction of a new single-family dwelling and detached garage with pervious driveway. Currently, the lot has a tennis court on it that's partially enclosed by chain link fencing. It's kind of a bluestone clay surface. But there's a small isolated vegetated wetland located directly to the south. It's a very subtle depression, and there's some additional bordering vegetated wetlands further to the south and to the southeast as well. The entire site is within floodplain, elevation 9. The proposed structure itself is outside, the primary dwelling is outside the 50-foot, and will be on a crawl space foundation with the first floor elevated above the floodplain elevation. The proposed garage will be on slab. Both structures will be constructed in conformance with building code standards, flood vents. There's minimal, very minimal site regrading around the structures. You can see upwards of 1 to 2 feet, just again tying into the structures itself. But there's about 2,600 square feet of the tennis court within the 50-foot buffer zone that's being removed, and we're proposing to restore
The 25-foot buffer zone to that off-site IBW, 914 square feet footprints, similar arrowwood, bayberry, high bush blueberry shrubs with the native seed mix. And then areas north of that restoration area to the proposed pervious driveway and garage will just be lawn, landscaped areas. That summarizes.
So most of the new structure, with this little exception here, will be outside the 50?
Yeah, there's 188 square feet of the proposed garage that will be within the 50 foot. But in relation to the proposed restoration area, that's a 5-to-1 ratio of what is being proposed versus what is being restored.
And then the rest of this will be lawn?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Small little pocket.
Any other questions for Brian?
I will throw in real quick. He had it, and because we'll come up, this is a project that does require waivers for a number of things. And this is one, and I'll beat Sarah to asking the question, that does include the waiver request against the alteration of the 50%, because it's still altering even though it's removing. So, still in there, and that waiver has been requested. Just to make it clear that's. Yep. This is the resource area that it's actually on. We normally bring it up, and it's for something like a coastal bank or something like that. So.
Yeah, that's because it's an IBW.
Anything from the public on Hurley? Okay, you ready to close, Brian?
Yes.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes.
Do I have that motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
That
Motion carries unanimously.
Can I keep one of the markup pages? Sorry, I didn't draft orders for those two, except waiver projects. Sorry. Next time.
Okay, Giggle, 22 Folger Avenue.
Good afternoon, Mark Ricks from Site Design Engineering, representing the applicants at 22 Folger Ave. This is a property that's been developed for quite some time. I think the original wetland line was delineated by Mr. Haynes here many years ago.
Not that far.
Well, no, this one's been around for probably 15 or so, I think something like that. Fair amount of time. We took a look at the site. There's a small pond on the site and a fairly abrupt drop off to the pond edge, which is the border of the wetland. It's stayed consistent despite relatively recent changes in the definitions with groundwater. Basically, the project before you is a request to rebuild an existing timber retaining wall located just on the wetland side of the house, which is outside of the 25. It's right here. No expansion. It's just the timbers are in pretty bad shape. They'd like to reconstruct it in place. The other thing is they're requesting to relocate an existing well to just inside the 50-foot buffer. And the reason for the well relocation is because they're upgrading the septic system and placing it on the one tiny narrow portion of the property just outside the 100-foot buffer. So overall, it should be a net benefit. They're not doing any additional landscaping or any changes except, they're going to re-landscape the area where the well is going to be placed. But other than that, no structural changes in the property. Well's moving from here to here, and the septic is going just outside the 100-foot buffer here. There is an existing septic tank which is going to be upgraded and a septic connection outside the 50. But the leach field will be outside the 100. There's an existing tank there. They're putting in a second pump chamber there and a connection running out. That's basically it for this one.
Any questions?
I was just going to say something really quick. This case doesn't apply, but since it hasn't really come up yet, we haven't really throw crates. Subsurface septic components like tanks and pump chambers, we don't normally consider to be structures by our regulations. So even for that to be, if it were just across the line inside the 50, would still meet our performance standards. We just haven't had one like this yet. So.
Anything from the public on Diggle, Ultra? Okay. Mark, are you ready to close?
I am ready to close.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, sir.
Do I have that motion?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
We're closing right and left here, aren't we?
That's good.
Okay, Turner and
no,
Sound,
sorry.
11 Francis Street.
Okay.
I think this one we have the before and after. Jeff.
Oh, sorry. Here's the red one.
Figure out what's what here. Existing conditions is on the bottom, proposed is on the top. Once again, Mark Ritz from Site Design and Engineering, representing the applicants at 1 Francis. The subject property is within land subject to coastal storm flowage. That's the only resource area. The applicant is proposing to pick up the house, relocate it slightly on the property, get it up out of the flood elevation. It's on a crawl space foundation now. It will be on a crawl space foundation when they're finished. They are proposing a slight expansion of the building footprint, approximately 210 square feet. And they're also proposing to add a pervious at-grade patio in the back. The only other change, really, there'll be a deck, front porch, and a set of stairs coming down because the house is going up a couple of feet. They're not proposing any grading or retaining walls on the site. That's basically relocating. There's an existing outdoor shower, existing above-ground propane tank. Those are all just being relocated with the house. Garage and pervious driveway are staying pretty much as is.
Any questions? Anything from the public on Turner and Sound? Okay. Mark, you ready to close?
I am.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes.
Do I have that motion?
Move to close.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, ME Real Estate LLC, 2 North Star Lane.
For the applicant, I'm Gasparo, Blackmore Associates. I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent application for work in the buffer zone to a vegetated wetland. Shown in blue on the plan before you is the vegetated wetland boundary that we have scaled from other plans. It's on an adjacent property, but it's from your records, and I've referenced the file numbers at which from when that was approved. And then we show in pink the 25, 50, and 100-foot buffer zones. And then what I've highlighted in yellow is the proposed silt fence and limit of work. And that is located at approximately 38 feet off of the vegetated wetland, with the reasoning there being to preserve the 50% of the area from disturbance between the 25 to the 50. The structure is located outside of the 50-foot buffer zone in its entirety. The only waiver that we've requested is for the 2-foot separation to estimated seasonal high groundwater, and that would just be for temporary dewatering if required during construction. I believe that the project meets all of your performance standards. We've filed, as I said, really as a notice instead of an RDA because of the issue related to the groundwater separation. And with that, I'd be happy to try to address questions or concerns that you may have.
Any questions? Anything from the public on any real estate? Okay, it's like a slam dunk there. Ready to close, our.
Yes, sir.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, sir.
I have that motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay. So we'll go to the public meetings, certificates of compliance.
No, sorry, it just, we missed a sheet in the packet. There's no amended orders. It was Joe's first packet assembly, Joanne's first packet assembly. I missed a page in my proofreading. All right, Soul Mare.
The Soul Mare LLC, 11 Columbus Ave.
This was a project, I'll get the plan out. That was for the construction of a second-story deck and some other deck alterations with grading and landscaping on Columbus Avenue. It's the one that's right at the end of it's right at the end of Columbus onto Long Pond. The decks were done in compliance with the original permit. There aren't any ongoing conditions or anything fancy to go with it. I would recommend that we can issue that.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries
Can I
unanimously.
just inquire, Mr. Chairman, that by virtue of them being on the agenda here, are all of these recommended by the staff?
No.
No.
One of them is not, and I can explain why really quickly. There was one of them, sorry, I just buried my agenda. The one for Cross and Bar at 22 New Lane. The plan we received for that wasn't showing any wetland setbacks or wetland lines, so we're waiting for an updated plan on those. But other than that,
I don't know if any commissioners have a need to sort of look at the plans on any of these, but I'm happy to move that those that are recommended by the staff, being number 2, 3, 4, and 6, be approved.
Does anybody care to second that motion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Not quite comfortable for that yet.
I'm not.
Not yet, I have to see it.
It takes
I
5 minutes.
understand what you're saying, but
Okay, that motion did not carry. Okay, so that'll take us to
it was a
Jordan.
good effort, though. Good effort.
Look, well, yes.
No, it's an
I'd
interesting
be happy to
point.
move if you say, don't do it.
Oh, I do.
It's a valid issue.
Or you can use mine. Someone wants to trade for a few minutes. Well, I'll dig out another one.
Okay, let's see, Jordan, 41 Sheep Pond Road.
All right, so Jordan, this was for the removal of a dwelling, septic components, maintenance of the existing lawn and path of the beach stairs. This was a house movement off of the Sheep Pond Road area. Almost for the plan name, I won't bother to call it out there. But this is the one where the bank had come back and the house was removed and they remown and seeded this area here and have maintained the path to their stairs onto the bank, and then the house and new leaching area and all those fun things are outside of our jurisdictional area.
And other houses in the middle of the road is still there?
This one?
Yeah.
Yes. That's all now.
For now.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue the order?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Goldridge, 41 Crooked Lane.
right, this was for the construction of an addition and then associated plans. We didn't have any other special conditions for this one. I'm sorry, the one saved the height. It's for the existing, for the addition on the existing structure. It's built in compliance, again, with the original orders conditions plan from our site inspection, and I would recommend that we could issue that.
In the wetland, according to it?
No.
Oh.
It's kind of a, it's an older, there is an older structure, yes, it is, but this is on the newer structure, which may be helpful to see. From the original design. So the addition that was constructed, there is an older dwelling that is within the BVW line. As it's laid now, this was an addition that was built outside the 50-foot setback from that wetland on the front house.
I just incorporated it.
Yeah. No, the plan is well done.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue the order of conditions for the certificate of compliance?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Stahl, 22 West Chester Street.
All right, for anyone that doesn't remember this one, this was the project on Westchester Street. We sat on for quite some while with the screw pile foundation and the little isolated wetland in the back. It was kind of restored with the addition in the garage. This is the one that actually went to appeal, and that was settled. So local only. But again, from our inspection that's there, and the as-built plan is pretty good. You can see that the setbacks to the wetlands and the buffer zones. Is that the house that was constructed, again, was built in compliance and in accordance with their plan. I actually got to witness them putting in some of the screw piles for the foundation when they put it in into the. This is the one that went through the old peat layer that was there. We had the video of the deer we got to watch in the backyard, part of one of the hearings. But yeah, it was actually pretty cool to watch them install those. It was pretty interesting. So, but everything is done in compliance, and I don't have any ongoing conditions for this one either.
So there's not issues with standing water or anything?
No, it's actually, it's a little tiny isolated wetland that's back there. It's not necessarily,
That's why it's just like,
yeah, it's really just it's more of a local drainage depression. I mean, it definitely has.
More of a neighborhood dispute. So
Yeah, they did some invasive species work too, but it was pretty minimal. But that seems to all been taken care of through the construction, so.
nothing ongoing.
Yeah, just regular. What they'll have ongoing is regular, obviously maintenance of the structure in the yard, and then they will be maintaining their protocol going forward for monitoring for invasive species. But
So they give us pictures or stuff?
yep, yes, pictures.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue certificate?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Go into a special Excel file for Joanna. Looking for those pictures in the future, or
What's that?
is there a special Excel file for things that have ongoing conditions? Like pictures
Yes,
and
we have
monitoring?
just recently started
So
one.
that would be like one of the first ones to get on there.
There's a few in there that we keep track of.
We've been trying to work on ways to keep track of when we ask them to give us stuff that they give it to us.
Okay, so Cross and Bar, we cannot.
Correct. We're just waiting for an updated plan from them.
Okay, Jelemy, 29 Quays Road.
All right. This is one of the older ones. Just to be sure I get this one correct as well. Been having all these in my head. So this was for the installation of the steel sheeting on that coastal bank, the reconstruction of beach stairs, and the creation and planting of the salt marsh area. It's an older order. It's from '06. So actually, I'll get this one. This is where the steel sheeting went in, and they did the other work grass, and then there's the stone path and the stairs. We've seen a lot of other orders for work up on top, but this one relates solely to there. So.
Yeah, this is replacement of.
Correct.
Okay.
And then with this one, the work was done in compliance as well. And again, there weren't any, they've provided all the other necessary information that they needed. There weren't really any ongoing monitoring components with this one. So I could recommend that this one could be issued as well.
Okay.
Had we did this one currently, there would be monitoring components to some of those works.
Oh, there's no pictures or stuff.
No, so.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue?
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
It was a
Okay, orders of conditions.
A couple of changes to make on the first one after the discussion.
Okay.
I was trying to be helpful.
So the first one is Sanford, 26 Easton Street.
All right, so I have a number of changes. This is the one will probably change the most. I had instructions to draft it from before, and then after the discussion, I have a couple changes and clarifications to make, because we're just sorting out some of the protocols. So, obviously, in number 19, all materials and machinery are to be stored outside of the resource areas. Obviously, the barge cannot be stored outside of the resource area, so I would either strike that condition or put excluding the barge.
Should we just exclude the barge?
I think it'd be easiest that way if they had a machine on land that they had brought in. They would be obviously keeping it there. And then I would also add that excluding the barge to number 20. And then 21, we've kind of sorted out, since they're going to be doing it from the water and not from land. This is an option that was on tonight. You could probably strike 21.
Yeah, because it's impossible for them, it's not really smart for them to do it during their time.
Correct. And then we had a 22 just to try to keep the barge off the bottom,
I don't think you can.
but I don't think we can. So just kind of want to hear from where it
You
sits.
can-ish, but.
So I would say we could probably strike that
Maybe
condition.
say Best possible separation? I mean, it's
Yeah, we
gonna
could
be
certainly put the barge shall maintain best possible separation
so that it doesn't park itself there in the state. of
Yep.
Iowa.
from the bottom of the festival land elevation at all times. And then I think I would like to add a 23 that simply says that siltation boom shall be attached to the barge to encompass the work area.
That's probably the best way to put it.
Okay, anything else anybody sees?
Should we do a time of year restriction? So do you want to do any kind of a time of year restriction or conference with the staff before you start work? Or?
I mean, they're required to provide us notice, if I can, through you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know when they would like to start doing work on that?
Obviously, probably this winter.
Yeah, I mean, my impression from speaking with everyone is they wanted to do it through the winter here.
Yeah, no, which is fine. I'm just wondering if it's going to work, it's going to progress like after May 1st, if they have to consult with you, or if there's anything that,
I mean, we could certainly put that work, beyond a certain date
you know,
required notice, because they have to provide a start work, but I can have that 24 that work beyond the 1st of May.
so we don't mess up our.
Yes. Work beyond May 1st requires staff approval.
Is that all right, Dave?
Yeah, I don't think we'll take them very long once they get started. All right.
You're not going to want to do that. Beyond
Okay, so do I have a motion to issue this as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Zarella. Old Line Nominee Trust.
Yep, so this is the one that was for the septic replacement in Wetland and then the renovation to that structure. The only kind of different condition is number 20, and that's just simply that once the Board of Health has approved the specific septic design, they need to provide us that approval, and then that will square away which, either the tight tank or the conventional system that they put in front of us to be approved. But I figured the easiest way was just to get the Board of Health approval, and that would include the plan that goes with it for. It was an IA or a tight tank, so, yep. Oh.
No, please don't.
Well, I'll straight the word conventional. Sorry, I was thinking of just the beach field. I knew what I meant when I typed it. Yeah.
I don't think that's what you said.
That's one that when I wrote it. Oh, great. That's awesome. Old order. Correct it again. Oh, that's really cool. I don't have any suggestions.
Okay. If there's no other recommendations, do I have a motion to issue as amended?
So moved.
All in favor? Any
All right.
opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I'll abstain from the vote on that.
Oh, and
I was out of the room.
okay. So that motion carries with Commissioner Glowacki abstaining.
Right. I'll apologize to the 4 newer commissioners that when we migrated everything, the old order cropped up, so there's a bunch of old names for the signature blanks.
So just fill in.
Yep, just fill in one. We'll be good. None of you are Mary Ware or John Gresher.
Boy, those are old.
What happens, you get on the computer network and it starts to eliminate like duplicate names sometimes when they migrated stuff over. I missed it.
Okay, Diggle on 22 Folger Ave.
Yep, this was for the rebuilding of that retaining wall, and then the well replacement, and then the septic system upgrade. There are no waivers for that thing. So I, to be honest, was kind of stumped for conditions.
So there's no waivers at all. Except the well, isn't it the relocation of the well within 50 feet?
It's not within 25 for the well.
There's a reason why it wasn't an RDA. I don't know why.
What's that? Well, there's enough of the components. So the septic inside the 100, the well inside the 50, and then the repair of that retaining wall. It's a repair in place, but it's adjacent to the house. So it qualifies as a notice.
Okay.
He could have applied under an RDA, but I think it's a better bet to.
Okay. It's
File
just
on
usually
notice.
if it's.
It's just R and R, remove and replace, same as there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have a motion to issue as drafted?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
I abstain from that one also.
What's that?
I abstain from that one.
Oh,
also.
that motion carries with Commissioner Glowacki abstained.
Now, I'm back with you now.
Okay, Turner and Son,
This was for that
1 Francis Street.
the house in the flood zone that was being raised to be flood zone compliant and then expanded slightly. I had no conditions for this one either. It's pretty straightforward. They're not proposing any grading or any of that fun stuff, so.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. 2 North Star Lane, Clark, or any real estate, any names on this one?
Yeah, it's the property owner and then the applicant. So this was a project that was the last one we reviewed. That was it's for the house that was being proposed outside of the 50-foot, but they requested a waiver for the 2-foot separation of groundwater. So I include that at the bottom, but that was for temporary dewatering for construction, but there's no permanent, so I couldn't really think of any other conditions for that thing.
Okay. Do I have a motion to issue as drafted?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay.
We got a couple more that we closed. Just to run through real quick. The only other 2 that we closed tonight were, sorry, I just skipped it, are 5 Sandy Drive, Hurley. Oh, excuse me, Westchester Street is first. David Donald Gator, 49 Westchester. Didn't have anyone. I had written down there some invasive conditions for the soil processing, and then obviously some monitoring for the invasives, but I didn't have anything else down. It seemed pretty straightforward. I just want to be sure that everyone's okay with the positive order for that one as well. No, we did not. We did not do Gator or Hurley.
We closed it.
We closed them, but we didn't issue.
I got lost and I got the wrong guy.
Yep, the other one is Hurley, 5 Sandy Drive. That's the tennis court removal.
Yeah. That seemed pretty straightforward, too.
It's a little bit within the 50, but there's a lot of mitigation.
Yeah.
And it's just land subject, no, there is an IBW.
The IVW. There's a BVW that's there too, but we're not dealing with the waivers for that one. All right, so I'm pretty straight. The only other project I had a question about, obviously I have some review, but I didn't know if we wanted to start. I could have a draft order prepared for Cumberland Farms too. We didn't really have a lot of questions about what was going on there. I don't want to
think that would work, yeah.
go there, but it seemed pretty straightforward, so thought I'd ask because it came up.
Completely aware of stormwater treatment.
Oh, to be honest, from reading the correspondence, the DEP has been all over that project for stormwater stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
Start,
complicated one, and I kind of feel for it. It sounds like, the good thing is it sounds like it's going to be a driver for the council Springs work. But then upgrading
Yeah.
is going to force the town.
So, and on the side note, as soon as, yeah,
I know, believe me.
I'll get you guys a copy of
Honest
the
with it.
of the ENF. I'm just waiting for some better copies of the plans that are digital to send you guys to read and to see if they were going to make some changes to it to get you guys a more final copy of like a final draft copy.
My only, I wouldn't say it's concern, but my only question is whether that storm drain can handle the additional input, and I'm sure that they've sized it appropriately. So, that would be the only question. But I think positive orders.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay, so that moves us down to enforcement actions. SPPF Town of Nantucket.
All right.
85101 Baxter Road.
I put this on because we've had a lot of questions about this in the office. I don't always put these on there, but, and I know you guys have all received it, is the DEP kind of post the superseding order on site. They had the on site for the superseding order that some of you guys attended, but since then they've issued out this administrative consent order. And what the administrative consent order is, this is why I wanted to bring it up, is to be sure you guys had questions or wanted to discuss it or discuss how it relates to our open enforcement, we could have that discussion. Essentially what the administrative consent order is for the DEP is a finality of the enforcement action that we took on the state's end. The state opted into, when we issue enforcement actions, we're required to send them to the state. And the state can choose to take action independently, or the state can simply just refer to us comparatively when we took action on some of the coastal engineering structures on Eel Point a couple winters ago. When we had those removed, the state chose not necessarily to take really any further action because they were satisfied with what it had. This is a case where they chose to take action for some of the opportunities, and they kind of outlined what they were taking action and issuing penalties against in the administrative consent order from what we had kind of initiated and what some of the information some other outside parties had sent them in regards to a lot of the ACO revolving around potential work below the mean high water mark. That was kind of the crux of it and what some of the penalties were involved. And that's where most of it was. So just for the process for how this works a lot of times are, they'll issue that enforcement and then they'll sit down in kind of a meeting with the violator and then kind of come to the terms of the administrative consent order. That's why it's signed by both parties. So to that degree, it's a somewhat negotiated settlement on the enforcement. We kind of do the same thing through our enforcement orders. It just doesn't produce the same result at the end. But a lot of what we do, and I'll use the Hummock Pond bike path as an example, we come in and essentially dictate to the violator of their order or of no order how to remedy that action, and then we take steps from there. So it's a little bit same, a little bit different, but I don't know if anyone had any questions or wanted to discuss it. I do think that following what the DEP has issued, not to beat a dead horse, but there are some issues that they have brought to finality that are in part of our enforcement action that at some point we are going to also need to bring to finality. So we can close out parts of our enforcement action in pieces. I'll use like if we just chose to release the portion of the concrete plugs as part of that enforcement that were used, we could include that. If we wanted to take some sort of action as it related to work that you guys determined to have been below high water and want to take some sort of reparation against that, that would be appropriate. But I think that this is a little bit of a jumping off point for us to start having discussions about some of those issues and kind of what the DEP has acted on. And just wanted to be sure everyone understood in kind of open session so we could discuss it as a group, what it was and what it is.
So 4 things are the concrete plugs, the work potentially under at the mean high water or below, the drainage pipe and the little trench at the bottom.
Correct.
That they added, and then the extra sand on the side were the 4 that we called out.
Correct. That is correct.
One thing I would like to, if we could do, is to see the pictures
Sure.
that we originally looked at that showed work at the, they came back and said, well, we had stakes in the tidal zone, and all the trenching we did was above the stake. I just wanted to review those and see if the trenching was, because that was, our one concern was, did they do work under the mean high water? And they said, well, we put stakes marking where that mean high water was, and we always stayed above that. So I'd like to.
Do we have pictures with the stakes in them?
Yeah, with the
well,
stakes
this is
and rocks.
one of the issues, and we've looked around, and we have some photo records and some other things where those stakes aren't always present.
Right.
They've either been removed or overtopped. For what it's worth, the other difficulty that we have, and it's a difficulty that DEP had to, and it's a difficulty that the Corps of Engineers, who also were in on this, also had to some degree as it relates to tidal cycles' ability to heal those areas.
Yeah.
In appearance, at least. Obviously,
Yeah.
some of the form and function may have been disrupted for a period of time, and that's hard to really quantify or measure. But as tidal cycles pass, if you've excavated a trench I mean, any little kid that's dug a sandcastle with a moat,
Sure,
you know, a tidal cycle comes in and that moat disappears. So,
But it doesn't negate that you did work.
no, so it's one of those for us, and this is, it's very rare that I think it's a path to proceed down. If that's a violation that we wish to take action on, I would think that a more appropriate action for us in that case would be some sort of penalty, because it's not something that we can get repaired. It's kind of similar to what the DEP took action for and issued out their monetary fine to do.
I know about discussions here that on work potentially below the mean high water mark. They began around the necessity for then speaking to the Army Corps for work below the mean high water mark. And when we got into this business and the penalty, we did hear from the Army Corps at some point.
Correct. The Army Corps kind of took the stance of the beach has healed itself from work that could have or potentially been done, and they essentially left it as something that they weren't able to determine, to properly determine, or that they wanted to take action on.
The same thing.
DEP,
No foul.
well, DEP made the same determination, but then in the same document also levied out a fine for violations of the act. So, for what it's worth, is they said we're not for certain, but here's your penalty. So, it's kind of a mixed signal, I'll say, for what it was, but the rest of the ACO doesn't really cover any of the other violations very thoroughly either. So I was kind of left in a little bit of confusion after talking to them, is you're issuing out a penalty, but you're not really declaring what that penalty is for. So
I thought the penalty was for the pipe.
the penalty was for the pipe, but again, there's no, it's also, the pipe is also still included under an appealed permit. So the pipe really hasn't fallen out of, it was installed to not be in compliance. So the pipe is kind of in a little bit of a limbo. So what I would say is our process is also somewhat independent of DEP's determination for the Wetlands Protection Act. So we can still take action against what we have our open enforcement against the bylaw, but I think at some point we need to start bringing conclusion to some of these open enforcements. And I think having this, I was just looking to hopefully get some direction from the board as to what avenues we wanted to pursue to start closing out some of these items or keep some of them open. Obviously, work that happened below mean water during essentially December and January, and work that's not continuing. There's no real mitigation or reparations that can be done. So we need to decide what we want to do with that, or do something to close that portion out as we move through. It's just the outstanding enforcement that has had some finality from DEP that I'm just looking for where you guys want to go with some of the remaining pieces. So
I think reviewing all the pictures and making a decision on
Look at the pictures first.
they can't go back in time and fix it. And I think we all agreed that the concrete plugs are small, and not a big deal. I don't know how people feel about the excess sand that's been placed in a couple of locations that we didn't authorize. I don't know how people feel about that.
Yeah, and
That's one thing or the other, you know. I would like to look at what, I think we had, a land council letter and then a letter from Epsilon.
there are a couple, and I'll get those. I guess part of
Review the record basically and see.
I guess part of why I'm asking is if there are directions we want to take, I want to be sure, because there's some of the avenues that we have for enforcement that I've never had to deal with as administrator. I really don't even think Dirk had to.
Fine.
Yeah, and I need to be able to get those things prepared and figure out our procedure for doing that in advance, because I don't want to have to wait. And I also, if we're going to go down the path of closing out pieces of that enforcement, I want to also be sure that I get notice to, in this case, SPPF, who are the violation holders, that it's going to be discussed, and give them notice that they can be here to receive whatever instruction, penalty, or closing out of specific items that we may be doing.
As I recall, that enforcement order we issued was by pretty much by unanimous vote, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Because I'm just remembering that, I know that I, for one, could say, when we looked through those, I wasn't really, the plugs, the sand, all of our discussion was, well, more sand please, oh, now there's too much sand in one place. That didn't bother me too much, and I don't want them working in violation of their permit, working below the mean high water mark, but if there's a little trench and it's washed over and there is truly no harm done that anybody can see, I don't sort of get too worked up about that, but I do think putting the enforcement order in place and then the potential for fining with so much a day, the whole point of that is to give the commission the authority of when something quite egregiously wrongful is going on, and in a way of getting attention and getting the notice of intent in front of us so we can condition it properly. And it seems to me that we're in a place with this whole thing where we're going to be in court and in appeals at the state level for quite a little while here. That my thought on it would be to hold it all, and eventually we're going to be either told the way this is going to play out by the court, or we're going to be in some kind of settlement conversations in executive session, and we can maybe deal with it then.
So just hold it open until everything else is settled?
This idea of piecemeal closing out seems to me like it's going to get a little confusing.
Yeah.
Or finding them just because we can, as I've always said, was one of my personal unfavorites. But holding it out in, I mean, I don't know where we're going with this thing. These appeal processes take forever anyways, but why? I'll just stop there.
No, I mean, why take away whatever tools we
Why?
have?
Yeah.
Right. Well, the reason why I brought it up is because DEP issued out a decision. I wanted to be sure that we at least had the conversation about it.
That we're aware of it, yeah.
Yeah, we're aware if there were
I agree with
questions,
that. I think it's
or
very tough.
you guys knew the options that you had in front of you in regards to your enforcement. So,
The good thing about holding it open is, and I'm really glad that pipe is capped, because I think that would really hurt them, honestly, where it's been installed. I think it would accelerate some erosion, at least on that end. But holding it open does allow us, if we do see any adverse impacts from these four issues.
well, and also I just want to be clear too. If there's something else that were to arise from the project that's not in compliance or causing adverse impact, just because you have one open enforcement doesn't mean you certainly couldn't issue an enforcement action on a separate violation. So they can, I don't want to say they can pile up,
Just hold
but
our courage and she knows this plays better.
The biggest caveat I would have, and I think this is way down the road, is if we had other things like this where you thought they'd be doing work in the mean high water zone. I mean, I expressed a lot of concern about it because I didn't think they had the roots to do the work. So if we were going to have, if they came back and we're going to continue that larger area, then we would at least have to include land under the ocean more seriously.
Right, well, I think everyone's going to be watching even closer, even Army Corps and everybody for future.
Yeah.
So they're
Would
aware.
like to see those pictures.
Yeah.
again.
sure, no, I'll definitely reissue those out. So we have some other
So
information.
let's
So.
just
Yeah.
hold off for now unless
And
somebody
review the
thinks
information.
different.
Okay. I just wanted to bring it to everyone's
Yeah.
attention because that was, I don't want to say it was a significant change, but
so I'd like to, any more information.
sure,
Yeah.
I'll put together a little package for everyone that kind of puts all that together. And then I did have one more enforcement that kind of came up later that we've been talking about for a while. If you guys remember, we issued out enforcement for 87 Squam Road for a path through a wetland without a permit, and then a path that went out to the beach in kind of a mowed area. We've done a couple site inspections kind of through the year, but I brought some pictures with today. So here's where the path was. I can just pass them around. The first picture that's a close-up is they've capped off the end of the path with two larger shrubs, so you can't really get through without going through the shrubs. The path behind hasn't fully recovered from being really mowed, aggressively cut. It definitely hasn't been maintained. The path from, if you guys remember where the leach field was, the big mound that was covered in kind of the other grasses, that path that comes in still merges into, and it looks like it's still being maintained from.
Oops, sorry.
Oh,
boy.
The path is still being maintained from kind of the leach field area to that area at the beach there. So there's still two paths where there was one permitted. obviously, the more egregious path and the more egregious violation has been rectified to some degree. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit longer to heal.
We just went to the top of like a bluff area where everything
Yeah,
was cleared out.
Yeah, but we had some potential possible St. Andrew's Cross, which still hasn't really resolved itself, whether it is or isn't. We haven't really made it out at the right time to double check. Because I know that when we were on the site, I know Ernie, Jen, and I were kind of in agreement that it looked like St. Andrew's Cross, and the few other people haven't thought so. It's kind of 6 1/2 dozen for the issue. So my question is, obviously, we need to follow up on it. If you guys would like me to follow up with them about the other path that hasn't been made whole by the letting regrow or transferring, if we want to try to get them back in to deal with that part and then get a more formal update on the closure of this path, we can, or if we want to take other action, we can. I'm just trying to...
What did we say to them in our order?
The enforcement order required them to discontinue the use of the paths and allow them to regrow.
And move all the furniture off the bluff.
Correct. Part of the issue that we had is we weren't sure about the St. Andrew's Cross for the area that they had mowed, and Natural Heritage didn't really give us a lot of guidance because we weren't sure if they had mowed it and had gotten a state protected species by mowing, if they were going to have to continue their violation essentially to provide for the state protected species.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what happens out there. You
So,
know when you get it.
That's kind of the conundrum we're in, but...
So they discontinued,
they've discontinued use of about 2/3 of the path.
They've gone a little further by kind of walking it off and making the...
Right, for the one through the vegetated wetland portion. The coastal bank portion is still, I wouldn't say not in compliance with the original permit. So we could try to get an update from them if that's the easiest way, but I'm just trying to stay on top of some of our open enforcements. And I'll also let the conservation restriction holder on that area know where we are too. So
can we...
I think so. At this point, obviously, they've done some of the work required, but it would we have a bunch of open enforcements that are still kind of lingering around, trying to, now that we're organized a little bit more, knock through them and try to get them closed out. And this is one that's kind of 2/3 of the way there. And we're trying to work with some of the other parties involved to complete it. But I would never act without permission from the commission.
So since there's enforcement order on this, can we go out and look at it?
Sure.
The commission, can the individual
Please,
commissioners?
before you do that, let me know, and I will pass along that there may be people from the commission going out, because that way I don't have someone getting the cops called on them or something weird. Or we can simply arrange to do a group viewing as well. We can do it as part of our regular site visits in 2 weeks.
Hangover one for 3 new commissioners, and I think...
Right, and just to be clear, so enforcement actions work a little different than the rest of notices of intent. Enforcement actions are issued by the board, but they're not really part of the public hearing process. So you and David and Bam, if you weren't here when an enforcement action is issued, you're still eligible to sit on an enforcement action because it behaves differently. It's kind of an outside the process action. So you're an acting member of the commission. You can act on any open enforcement. So feel free to jump in, or if you have questions, or if you want to see some of them. And hopefully we'll have that report for you at the end of the month of all of our open enforcements. But there's some that come up and some that kind of spur into action. So this is one of them. I'm just trying to keep everyone on top of and moving through, because it'd be nice to close some of them out.
Okay. We don't have minutes again.
No, sorry.
Okay, so reports.
September just got hit.
CPC.
I have nothing to report. I think the deadline for applications for this year is the end of the month, I think.
Next Friday?
What's that?
It's next Friday.
It's next Friday. Well, yeah.
Okay.
Not this Friday, but a week from tomorrow.
The 12th. So I'm frantically
EDC.
putting one together.
Nothing.
Nothing? Mosquitoes.
If there's anything new since I last reported.
Anything else? Okay, commissioners' comments. Anybody have anything they want to bring
I
up?
forwarded something to Jeff the other day. I think I forwarded a picture. There's a place that has built a berm up on the bluff off of the South Shore, and it's not too far off from Wyocombe. Can I send you that photo? I don't have it. Okay.
Well, send it to me again.
Yeah, I'll send it to, it was, obviously, these people that are right on the edge of, they have tons of room, but they built a big berm all the way around their house in the resource area. And I don't know if they were trying to help their erosion issue, but it's not a good thing. It's actually collapsing the bluff in front of their house.
Oh, God.
And somebody from the public took a picture of it and said, "Did you guys permit this?" And I'm like, I don't ever recall permitting the berm.
No,
I'll send it forward.
Jeff, I don't know if you remember this. I'm getting a bunch of emails from Robert, and I can't think of his last name. But it's on number 2, and I can't think of the street. It's down there.
2 Franklin Street?
2 Franklin, yeah.
From Bob Ruley?
Yeah, Bob Ruley.
Oh, yeah. So,
I went and looked at that, and actually it looks pretty good.
well, so what happened is it's on our plan is they showed the proposed curbing for the road, and they installed the curbing. And what happened is, if you guys don't remember what that site originally looked like, a lot of the neighborhood was parking on that site. There was kind of a dirt parking area there that went into it, and that parking is vanished into the curb and the area there between the fence and what's there. And the neighbors are not really happy, but it's nothing that's not in compliance with their
None of
permit.
that work is on town property?
The curbing work is within the layout of Franklin Street, yes. So it would have required approval through traffic safety and the DPW. And that's where I directed Mr. Ruley to see if they had
I think
permits.
the question that cropped up there, that was if it is on town, if it is work that is permitted by this commission on town property, was the town an applicant for it, so it's similar to what goes on there with Wisconsin Bluff area.
That was part of the question. I mean, part of it comes to, I mean, we have obviously a lot of permits where driveways and curbs are installed within, adjacent to the public paved way. I mean, the paved way wasn't moved or shifted in any way, shape, or form here. Typically, the practice of the commission has been for driveway tie-ins and those things that they don't require the town to sign as an applicant, because you're still within, you know, your fee interest of the road and a lot of times. So this may be a case where maybe that should have taken place, but we've never required that before. Because ultimately, you're doing work within, if you're tying in a driveway to the road, you're doing work within the public road layout.
So do we know if there is lawn area or hedge planting on town and Nantucket property on that site?
I would say that there is area that is outside of the split rail fence that is currently lawn between the fence and the curb.
On town and Nantucket property or on their property?
Is within the layout of the road.
In town and Nantucket? on the road?
Well, I don't know if Franklin Street is a town-taken road or not.
So working on some property that is not theirs.
Oh,
Well, but everybody has their lawn up to the road.
well, that's, I would say, that's a question that's best directed to the Department of Public Works. They're the ones that keep track of that. I don't, unfortunately, have all of the town-taken roads memorized.
I can pass this around. If you want to see what this is.
My gut feeling tells me that Franklin is probably
Yeah, this
not.
is 60 minutes.
Not a town road?
Maybe not. It's pretty small. It may be, though. I'm not positive. I won't obligate myself to one way or the other. But if it's not a town-taken road, it functions a lot differently because it's not technically town property. It'd be kind of like that issue we had out at East Tristram.
Has that property has not been in for a certificate of compliance yet?
Has not been in for certificate
So
of
one
compliance.
idea is we'll have all those dimensions.
Oh, so it hasn't got one yet.
Correct.
They'll explain it all to us in a way that we can see what we
Yes.
think.
I will say, anecdotally speaking, the wetland and the buffer zone that they had to replant for that project, I would say looks pretty good.
Yeah, I thought so too.
The plants looked healthy. It looked like everything was set up there. I poked around in the dirt a couple times. It looked pretty decent. So
That's a picture of that lot.
I'm not saying that it's perfect, but as far as wetland restoration is
Is that a spaceship?
Okay, Jeff, do you have
That is
anything
a
else?
giant
Okay, so we're ready to adjourn then. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Wait, Bam has something.
Oh, Bam. I'm
I
sorry.
just wanted to say that, because I keep my boat off the wood property in Nantucket, that there are 5 trailers there now, more than there ever has been. People just leave trailers there, and also there's this structure that was supposed to be a dinghy rack, and it really ought to get removed. And I don't want to get, jump on, I know the person that built it, and I don't want to jump on his toes, but I've gotten some personal complaints about it during the summer. And there ought to be, we ought to do something about trailers, so they don't get, and then they end up getting left there. And there's never been more than maybe 3 there that I remember.
Good old Nantucket, huh? If it's open
I
space,
mean, I know,
that's
I
what
like
it's
it, I like the place the way it is, but it needs to get respected the way it is also, I think.
Oh, I've seen them.
I'll send this picture to everybody and to Jeff. Well,
Yep.
I'll send it to Jeff and he'll forward it to everybody.
Is that our property down there?
The wood property is technically owned by the Conservation Commission. But the dinghy racks were not supposed to end up there, but they landed there and they weren't moved because there was some confusion for who was going to move them. But they should be leaving at some point soon.
Okay.
They were done as part of an Eagle Scout project, and when they were completed, they were supposed to go somewhere else. And there was some confusion on where they were supposed to go, and then they needed to get moved, and they just haven't had the opportunity to get moved. But they should be gone pretty soon.
Well, they should just take them apart and move it that way,
So
I was going to do that, but it's not as easy as it seems. Every stainless screw that they put in, they twisted the head on it. Take a while. Then an impact wrench, I think you need to figure it out. That's what ought to get done.
Okay. Well, anything else from anybody here except for the audience?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
No, you just stay there. We're going to leave.
Thanks, everybody's patience tonight.
We'll be back in the drink.